I'm Jobe. This is the Appalachian Creative Podcast, episode 12.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Appalachian Creative Podcast. Joining us today in the studio, we've got Jobe Weitzel. Jobe is a working professional and a recent graduate from the Marshall University Film Program. Jobe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a recent graduate of Marshall University's video production program before it became a filmmaking degree. I graduated back in 2023, and I've worked all over the state doing commercials, music videos, short films, and just kind of getting my foot out there and seeing what happens.
Awesome. I know we're really excited about the potential behind that program at Marshall. I know as more people get into the program and get out of the program, that just is going to introduce more working professionals into our area, and hopefully that will raise the quality of work, I'm assuming, or at least bring more productions to the area. I know I recently attended the capstone screenings at Marshall, and I saw your name in a lot of those credits. Care to tell me about some of the projects you worked on?
Yeah, I worked on a great project recently, directed by Grayson Maddox. It's called Yippee Hooray. It was a wonderful production to be on, very professional, very top of the line, in my opinion. The students coming out of Marshall have been really doing great when it comes to not only like on-set etiquette and like producing quality content, but like also just creating their vision, which I think is awesome. And not only did I work on that one, I worked on another one called Little Opal, directed by Hannah Chapman.
Yeah.
And that one was less of like a comedy, which for Yippee Hooray was more of a comedy.
That was the Yippee Hooray was the mascot one, right?
Yes.
Okay. That one was really, really cool. I really liked that. Not that I didn't care. I liked the Little Opal as well.
Oh, of course.
But no, that Yippee Hooray, the way that he pulled you along the story, I really enjoyed that. What would you say your primary role was on Yippee Hooray?
On Yippee Hooray, I was more of a producer. Like I was more advising Grayson as they were going through the stages of production, as they were going through like planning, pre-pro, post, and on-set production. But like on-set, I just kind of a little bit of a floater, like going around. Grip needs help, I'll help grip. If sound needs a sound check, I'll help them with that. Kind of just jack of all trades, kind of being whatever.
I imagine with those capstone projects, the university more or less would want you to be very diligent in every step, whereas an independent guy like myself, I might be able to skip a step and still get a similar result. But it's nice whenever you have recent graduates that are able to contribute time still yet. I think that speaks to our community here in West Virginia. Speaking of community, I know that was a big part of that Little Opal movie or short film. Tell me a little bit about your what you did on that set.
Kind of the same thing I did with Yippee Hooray. I was an advisor. I was like a producer. That short was a lot more of an emotional journey than Yippee Hooray. It was a lot more closely related to the life of Hannah Chapman, who was the director. She did a fantastic job, not only like keeping it together on set when she was like trying to navigate her own story, but also as like maintaining professionalism and like showcasing her story in a way that I think is pretty accurate to how she described it on screen from like the pages, if that makes sense.
We actually had a person in our film club, Noah Fisher, was actually on Little Opal in the movie as
he was the young boy. Yeah,
I met him on set. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah,
dude, he's a character. For him to be so young, he's definitely talented. So, one thing that stood out about, or I imagine when you're working on a project like Little Opal, there's this kind of buzzword that's been coming out and around since, I guess I heard it first whenever they were talking about Wicked, but it's holding space. I imagine in a film with so much personal attachment, you have to leave room for that, correct?
Yeah, you definitely have to save space for like how I navigated set when I was on there. I allowed Hannah to not only direct and give her vision of how she wants the story to be told, but also to give her time to really feel the emotion, and especially with something like that, like holding space for not only allowing it to breathe and allowing her to navigate it without breaking down, but also being able to lost my train of thought.
Why don't we for the newer people that might be listening to our podcast, what is holding space?
Holding space, I would describe it as, like Jobe was saying, leaving room for the emotion. You leave room for the characters to embrace that real life aspect of the character. Some of those, deeper, more intimate moments.
Yeah.
I think you have to navigate on set, delicately, especially when you're working on a personal project, but when you're, dealing with
Kind of letting the film breathe in
yeah,
the
you're
storytelling.
leaving.
So
yes.
when I did my doc, I had obviously some pretty hard hitting content that talking about infertility and stillbirth and stuff like that. That's something in the edit bay I really, really tried a lot of. There's actually, I think, about a 2.5 minute sequence where it's just tears. Not a lot of audio, it's that silence, but it's kind of letting what just unfolded breathe a little bit, which is exactly, I didn't have the opportunity to see Little Opal, but I'm assuming it's the same type of stuff. Just kind of letting everything kind of come down a little bit before you move to the next train of thought.
Especially when you're working with like hard hitting topics like, the passing of a relative or the loss of a child, stillborn, things like that. Or even when you're dealing with, intimate subjects like, sexual orientation and things like that, you have to leave room for the actors to feel that and to bring it into the set. And again, I hadn't heard the expression until the last few months, and so,
I always thought it was just there's power in the pauses. Is what I said to my people that helped me edit in my movie. I said just keep it there. There's power in the pauses. That was the phrase I used. I actually didn't know that's what it was called till just now. Yeah, I kind of put it together, but yeah.
Well, and I think when you're doing like doc work, especially when you're holding that space, that's where you're going to get the emotion. That's where you're going to get the wringing of the hands and that single tear drop.
Tear.
Yes,
that's my favorite shot in that movie. Is the one tear coming down.
But it's nice. One, that they're asking you to come onto these sets and they're following your advice. That's always helpful. Now beyond your work with some students and that, tell us a little bit about what you're doing professionally now. You said you graduated with a video production degree. How are you utilizing that?
Straight out of college, I worked with Brad Paisley actually on a music video that he did. He shot it, and it was, where was it?
I don't know, but I remember you posting about it, and I wasn't jealous at all.
It was in the southern West Virginia. We went all around the area, right where not his stopping grounds. He actually grew up near where I lived in Wheeling. He lived by Moundsville in Glendale. But we went around all around southern West Virginia. We shot a bunch of B-roll. He did a bunch of cool music video stuff. My first time ever being on a professional set was that job. And I learned a lot, and I met a lot of good people, and a lot of good contacts. And kind of recently, though, I started working with Studio 291. They're a production company based out of Huntington, and they make a lot of like commercial content for businesses in the area. And sometimes we do a little like personal project. I recently just worked on a personal project with Harrison McGinnis. He's a local filmmaker in Huntington, and we just been going around filming B-roll and just kind of making a experimental doc. On top of that, I've just been kind of working on commercials. I've worked with people in Charleston on commercial content for the Hatfield McCoy Trails. I've worked on short films that have filmed all over West Virginia, really. I worked on a short film in Green Bank? Yeah. It's the observatory.
Yeah.
I filmed out there in November of 2023 for a week. It was fantastic. A lot of LA people coming in. Their roots are in West Virginia. They came in, wanted to produce a story that's all about like the West Virginian life, and like it was a sci-fi thriller, but elements of West Virginia life. And
How much would you say having your degree helped you to get on those bigger productions early on?
Oh, 100%. Having a video production degree helped me tremendously because I actually got my degree during COVID, and I started the program in 2019, and that's really when like lockdown hit, and having the resources of Marshall University and of the video production program, it helped me really get a leg up above other people, if that makes sense, because I had access to all the equipment that the the university provides the students. I had access to all the professors and all of their knowledge, and I had access to all of the resources of like the Adobe suite, all the editing software, and just having that knowledge and that kind of push in the right direction really helped at least me and like a lot of other people like get into the field and get into like the business.
Marshall University actually, in my second film, my first documentary I did, Aaliyah brought some gear from Marshall, and I was like, oh, I love this stuff. So like after the shoot wrapped, I went out and bought all the gear that she brought pretty much. She brought a dolly. I had never actually worked with a dolly before, and I was like, oh, those shots were sick. So I went out and I bought a dolly and the tracks and the whole deal. So, you know, the gear that you get at Marshall doesn't just help the students, right? It helps any filmmaker that comes in contact with it. It's stuff that, you know, I wouldn't have had access to it, and it made my doc better. And, you know, who knows, maybe the awards it won were because of the dynamic shots from the
I think
dolly.
having access to resources like that, it helps lower the barrier, and so you're able to create. And I think that's something that holds a lot of people back in terms of being able to create or to create confidently, you know, because we all want to produce quality. And I think that's something that most every filmmaker would agree is pretty important. And having the support of professionals that know what they're talking about and trusting their guidance is huge, even beyond just the equipment, you know, because the equipment barrier is getting lower and lower every day. You know, they're putting out a camera that's a little bit cheaper and it's just as capable. And so I think that the resource of the people probably is huge, because me and Jacob both learning on our own. We Google and YouTube, and we just have to kind of take their word for it. So it's nice whenever you have adults in the room that can help steer the conversation.
Oh, don't worry. There's a lot of Googling and YouTubing on this end of the rope too, buddy. Don't worry.
Well, and we've touched on this before, but being a filmmaker is about constantly being able to learn, being able to adapt, being willing to go out of your comfort zone in order to accomplish what you set out for. And we get lost sometimes in that. We get lost in trying to tell a story. We get lost in scheduling and coordinating and all of those other things. So I think it's nice whenever. Hell, I lost my train of thought, Joby.
How'd that affect on people? Sorry, I don't know.
But no, I like to learn. I like to consider myself as every day I'm learning something new. I was watching stuff when Jacob came in earlier just to try to get more familiar, learn what holding space is. You know?
Yeah, right.
So.
As you grow as a filmmaker too, what I've learned is I stopped looking at YouTube videos about, you know, what a dolly is and, you know, different movements with the camera, angles, lighting. I started looking at stuff like what we were watching today about like the, you know, working with distributors and stuff like that. I had a pretty big growing experience during 2 because I, you know, came up with this movie that got thrusted into the topic got thrusted into national attention. And I had to learn, I've started working with a publicist, and he was bringing up things like straight splits and IP and this and that. And I just didn't know enough about it and about the distribution of it. So I started looking at information about the stuff that I'm not even going to be doing. It's not something that I do on set. It's what other people that will do it for me, you know? So, but it helped when I started getting into these conversations with, like my first conversation I had was with Warner Brothers, and I was able to kind of understand their lingo a little bit more, and it didn't end up working out, but I was able to, advocate for myself, because I knew more. I wasn't just putting my trust in one person and his.
Well, confidence comes in knowing,
Right.
And
100%, yeah.
I do think that, especially young filmmakers or filmmakers that are trying to get into it, we bog ourselves down in what we don't know before we even try. And a lot of things you have to learn on the fly. You know, you can know everything about 3-point lighting until you're on set and you're blocking, and now you have to completely throw all of that out and figure, okay, how am I going to fake this? How am I going to do that? And so, but confidence is important in terms of just advocating for yourself on set. You know, I've been as a freelancer on some pretty, I wouldn't call them hostile sets, but sets that could have went hostile pretty quickly, just because of the director being a little bit gruffier than what you'd want to work with. Yeah. But being able to advocate for yourself with confidence is key, especially early on. You don't want to get pulled in a position that takes you away from something that you're morally comfortable with, or something that you're. I've been strapped in the back of side by sides and just drove all around these trails. And was I the most comfortable? No, but I was confident in that.
But you had a lot of fun.
I did have a lot of fun, and I was confident that in what I was doing, and I was confident that I was going to get what we needed
and survive.
That one was secondary.
Depends on who's driving. Depends on who's driving.
Yeah. Well, after I got off that set, I went and bought a harness because now I travel with a harness as opposed to just a ratchet strap across the chest. So.
Did it work?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, for what? So I had a good time.
Jobe, tell me about. You said you went to Marshall for filmmaking. Well, before the filmmaking, but it was for filmmaking. How has that impacted you now that you're at 291 and you do more kind of commercial work? Is there some translation there? Was it a new experience altogether? Kind of how did what you learned at Marshall, translate into not only the professional space but also the commercial space?
A lot of the classes that I took at Marshall were for, at least in my opinion, more focused towards the commercial space.
Okay.
Because there were a lot of classes that were like ad PR continuity writing, which we wrote advertisements for like local nonprofits and local businesses. And there were classes like the other half of ad PR is where we created commercials basically. And a lot of my skill sets coming out of Marshall was more focused towards commercial based, and kind of shifting away from that out of college and going into more like creative, like music videos, short films. Like I think the translation there is definitely easier than I think people think, because it's all like the same basics. I mean, you have your 3-point lighting systems, you have your ratchet straps on the back of ATVs, but it's just the application. I mean, I'm working with 291 has been great. I mean, I've not seen or felt any like alienation of skill set, because it's all like the same building blocks. You just build a different Lego car. Basically.
What I've experienced in my time doing commercial work, while I love doing film, is technically on set it's all the same. Where the real difference is in the writing and in the storytelling. Jerry and I actually worked on a ad for a company that we had 30 seconds. That was it. And he and I were editing it, and we were like, what in the world? How do these people get 30 seconds
and tell
a whole story?
Yeah.
It put a whole new kind of perspective for me in how talented you have to be to make these commercials that you see them on TV and it just flows naturally. You don't really think about it because it makes sense. Mm-hmm. But then we were watching our first cut of this 30-second commercial. We were like, oh my God, what did we just, it was just a bunch of shots, like it's just a bunch of stuff. And, over the course of the next hour, we were able to kind of format a really good storyline and fit it into those. But the line between film and commercial, I'm going to say film and commercial work is storytelling.
Yeah, and I would call myself more of a videographer than a filmmaker, and so I find that I enjoy the ease of being a videographer as opposed to labeling myself a filmmaker, because I feel like when you put that filmmaker tag on, then there's a raised expectation. There's a raised bar in what you're doing. And I don't know that I've accomplished that yet in order to successfully call myself a filmmaker. So, but I wanted to ask you, Jobe, what is your favorite thing to do on set?
My favorite thing to do kind of fluctuates. I love operating camera. That's what I do as Studio 291. I am their in-house cinematographer, and I just handle camera. I love building camera rigs. I love handling lenses. I love shooting with a gimbal. I learned a lot of videography and a lot of camera stuff on set out of college, and that's just kind of what I've gravitated towards. I've also really loved doing like sound work. Like I love operating like sound systems, soundscapes. I love building soundscapes, not only like on set Foley, but also post-production sound. And kind of, so I don't want to forget about this, kind of going off of your point with the line of filmmaking and commercial work. I just recently helped Studio 91 kind of produce a commercial for a local like credit union. And I had also ran into that where I made a 60-second cut and we got it edited, and I was scared because it's a lot harder to scrunch everything in that 60 seconds or in this 30 seconds even than if you would if you have like a 7-minute loose like time frame for a short film. You know what I mean? And it's definitely, especially for your first couple times, harder, but how I've kind of navigated that, and it has gotten a lot easier for me, and I think it'll translate easier also for newcomers coming out of like Marshall University, or even like people who don't have that college background and just want to get into it. I think definitely it's not as daunting as I think people want to make it out to be. But I think like once like you do get in the editing bay, and once you do like get a first cut together, you kind of see how it flows and you can work from there. I've found that makes it a lot easier to marry the two ideas rather than like alienate them.
Yeah, I could see that. If you're a baker and you understand the concepts of mixing flour, eggs, and sugar, then you can translate that into larger projects. And so after you develop a formula, then you're able to kind of copy and paste that. That makes a lot of sense. So in getting those reps in, how has getting reps on some of these film sets with, Marshall helped kind of translate there? Being over versus kind of taking direction.
Starting out at Marshall, I was always like the one person who really didn't know what was going on, because I came into the program kind of like a clean slate. Like I worked on like video production stuff in high school. Like I worked on like the news station stuff, but I wasn't really like set acclimated, if that makes sense. Like I was much more of just kind of like a blank slate. And
so you didn't really have like I'm going to go to this program and be a broadcast, something like that. So
like I just went into it kind of like I did it in high school. I'm just going to see kind of what happens. And I went into it with like, clean slate. And starting at the bottom, you really get to see like what you would like to do, because everyone just kind of has the guy on the lowest rung do everything, especially on like a zero budget or like a student film.
Yeah.
Like everyone's wearing all the hats anyway. I mean, not one person's like dedicated sound guy, dedicated,
they're all swing positions.
Exactly. Like everyone's swinging everywhere, but the swing PA is kind of doing everything. And I think it's a great opportunity to learn what you want to do.
Yeah. It's a good opportunity to get your hands wet in everything you do. And I actually tell anybody, I have a couple people that have said, hey, I want to get into film. How do I do it? And that's what I say is, when you're on a set, do as much as you can. Help with lighting, and then grip, and then directing and camera, all of those different things, because they're all different talents. And especially if you want to be a director, I think that's actually more vital than a lot of other places, because if you want to work in camera, you're going to gravitate toward camera, right? But if you're a director, like for me, I have always been more interested in camera than anything else. But I knew how important lighting and sound was, so I had to gravitate toward that. And then you get into lighting and sound, you're like, how do I put these up? And then you get into grip, Yeah. So they all flow together. So as a director, I think it's super important to do those swing jobs.
Well, and I I find a lot of value in having a diverse set of skills. You know, I say a lot, I carry, and that comes from.
I need to get that on a shirt.
I do.
I carry. Jerry
I try. I try to carry, but that comes from one willingness to learn every role, every position, and a willingness to act on that. You know, if you've got a project and you need X, I'm that. If you need Y, I'll do that. If that's what your project needs, whatever it takes, because I want you to get your project made. I want you to have the success of, man, we completed that. That's awesome. Because, man, you get hung up on those barriers, and, man, all it took was a guy with one light, you know, or a guy with a set of lenses or this or that or the other, whatever it may be. And I think that's one of the reasons why our pre-production and production grants with the foundation were introduced, because I hate to talk to somebody and they talk about, man, I've been writing this for 2 years and just kind of stuck. Let's get it made. Like, well, what's holding you back? There's enough talented people in our area. There's enough resources in our area to get something made. So let's do it. Let's get it done. But not everybody is willing to. Not everybody's in a position to learn every position because, well, you got a job, you know, and so, you know, you're a cam op day in and day out. You don't necessarily get to work a lot on sound. You don't necessarily get to do a lot of this or that or the other.
And I think that is one thing that set, at least myself, of course, I self-taught. I didn't have the opportunity to learn, get a 4-year degree in film or video production, or anything like that. And what I always heard when I would be watching YouTube videos or even the masterclass videos and stuff like that, I think in Martin Scorsese's masterclass, he actually says on set, you're not supposed to ask questions. If you're a camera, you do your job. You don't give input elsewhere. That was kind of a common theme that I saw in my time researching kind of set etiquette and stuff like that. And I said to myself, that's stupid, because I'm like you want to learn how to, boom op, then, we'll do a couple extra takes and let you learn how to hold a boom mic, and
I also think that's why we probably gravitate more toward the independent film scene as opposed to these higher end productions, because, well, it's not our money. It's not somebody, it's our time. It's our resources. Whenever you're dealing with somebody else's time and you've got people who flew in from LA and they've got tens of thousands of dollars on the line. Now, I'm not asking a bunch of questions. I'm just going to do as I'm told. And that's valuable in and of itself, being able to follow direction. How much would you say humility helped in terms of getting started?
Having humility is something I think is almost a necessity in starting out with filmmaking, especially low budget, because if you go in gung-ho and you're like, oh, I'm this big bad camera op, or I am the best sound guy this side of the Mississippi, or something ridiculous.
I'm a graduate from Marshall University's film program. You know what I mean?
Like, no one's going to want to work with you. And I mean, like, most of the time with these low budget or like zero budget films, I mean, like, there's not money on the line. So no one's gonna, like, there's no incentive for people to like get hired or like try to be there. So they're not gonna bring you back on. And let's say there is one of these big LA jobs coming into town, they need people, and they're not gonna reach out to this big bad film student because no one wants to work with them.
Because he had a bad attitude on set.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the small market film scene, it's much more important that, because you might want to get onto this Hollywood set someday, when you're on set with a no budget or a micro budget, be willing to jump through departments, because then, Jobe's producing on a set and I work with Jobe and I'm just this stellar PA. Well, hey, Jobe, you know anyone that can PA for me? Real quick, let me give him a call. He won't do that if you're the guy that's like, no, I'm in camera. I'm not touching them.
Well, they say bad gas travels fast in a small town. And so when you're working in a small network, when you're in LA and you're one bad attitude out of 15,000 people, the word doesn't spread as much. It'll still get around and it'll still hurt you some. But I think when you're working in small markets where you're in a pool of one of 50, it gets a little bit tighter, especially if your skills kind of put you at the top, and then your bad attitude brings you back down. I can see a lot early on in my sales career where I just didn't have the humility. I didn't have that willingness to do somebody else's job. And by accommodating that and learning that and putting myself aside, I've been able to grow and contribute and put in on other people's things. And that's important when you're getting a film done, because when the credits roll at the end of a movie, it's not one name at the top.
There's 10, 15, 20 people on these short films sometimes. And even if you're going into like short films and you have this big, bad, gung-ho attitude, I mean, it's like any job. Like, you go in there with a bad attitude, no one's going to want to hire you out again.
Yeah.
Like, it's all about like who you know and like how you present yourself. And it's just like any professional environment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all how you not only present yourself on set, but also like how you present yourself. Because I think having humility is like a great backbone to have on set, but also you have to be confident in yourself.
And if you're an independent filmmaker, please have humility.
100%.
When I started out, there were so many mistakes I made. And not just making films, but managing the people on set and managing people that, in a business perspective that worked for me and all of this stuff. And I always was just like, you're an idiot. And it's just, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yep. Yeah,
so
for sure.
In the creative industry, a lot of times you get drawn, sucked into the project, and that's all you think about. And then you realize that like there's people that you have to help and mentor and pay and do all these things with. And it's really easy to forget about that stuff when you're letting those creative juices flow. You kind of let everything else fall to the wayside. So be humility, learn, and be humble. That's my tip of the day. I have said that to everybody I know.
Eagle eye tip of the day.
Yeah.
Humility.
Now that the film scene in West Virginia is kind of growing and blossoming, what are some things that you're looking forward to, or some things that you would like to see come to the area?
I would love to see some sort of like local rental house in the area for equipment, because the last time I had to go rent equipment or even talked about it, like the closest ones in like Cleveland or Columbus. And there's no, like, besides Marshall University's like their own little equipment room, there's nothing. And so many times I've rented out stuff for like small sets or for local like independent stuff, and I've introduced people to all this gear and they've never seen it before, and they've learned, and like it's this learning experience. And there's just nothing like that in the area, like even in the state. Like there's no way for me to like.
There's not a rental house in the state.
I think there was word of one maybe coming into Morgantown. But
I heard about that.
I also don't know how much that helps anybody in our state, because, we can just go to Pittsburgh now.
Right. I wonder when people say, oh, a rental house is coming, I wonder if it's a true rent. Are they going to have the Cook lenses and the 1200 lights and the Alexa minis? Like, are they going to have those, or are they going to have some Saray Nightwalkers, 35 to 1 to... I use Sarays all the time. I love them. I love the Nightwalker series. But that's not something I would get at a rental house, So I wonder when, hey, there's a rental house coming. Well, am I going to be able to get the stuff that they have in LA, or do I need to go on? What's the website?
Borrow lenses, lens rentals.
Like there's like B&H.
There's B&H. There's a website, Rent a Lens or something like that you could just rent pretty much any lens. Or am I going to be able to walk into your place and not only get it, but then test it, right? Because you look at any rental house in those big markets, and it's not only can I walk in and do it, they have kind of a set like this that you can put a dummy up and work on the focus and get a feel for it all. So it's all, a rental house is more than just signing a paper and walking away with some gear, right? So I agree with you, Jobe. I want to see something like that in the state where we can not only rent, but test and learn how to use it before we walk out with it.
Well, and like you said, I think it helps to elevate the production value. You don't just have the talent anymore. You also have the equipment to help elevate.
And gear isn't the end all be all. You can make great stuff with no gear, or with less gear. My first movie I shot on like a Sony A6400 and a Sony A7 III.
Yeah,
those are expensive, but they're not $60,000 REs, right?
Yeah, they're not cinema level, like Hollywood level cameras,
right? So gear's not end all be all, but it helps when you're trying to push our industry into a more professional and higher production value conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And even like kind of going off of that, just like the community aspect, because having somewhere where you can go to just talk gear, talk shop, like every other kind of job market has that kind of area.
Yeah.
But West Virginia in particular doesn't have that place where filmmakers can go shop lenses or like talk about, hey, I want to go rent out a new gimbal. I'm going to go down to X, Y, and Z, and we're going to go test it out, talk to the guy, see how it works. I mean,
and if you don't want to use a gimbal, maybe they have a Steadicam. You know what I mean? So that's another benefit is I bought a Steadicam just because I wanted a Steadicam. If I were able to go test it, probably wouldn't have bought one because it's very hard to operate well, especially when you're pressed for time. The gimbal's a much more time efficient device, but that's something you can go and test and rent it for an hour and actually go back. Don't even leave the premises and just go back and walk around the room with it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or just to, like you said, bounce that idea off of somebody else who has used that equipment, who, hey, this is what I'm doing. Do you is this the best that I could use? And they might have a way more informed idea. They may be able to say,
hey, I'm looking to upgrade my gimbal to a Steady. Well, have you ever used a Steadicam?
Yeah.
Do you notice that there's not a gimbal operator in the credits as a Steadicam operator, though? It's because it takes a whole different line of expertise to do those things.
Yeah.
Just to balance it is a task in its own, balancing a Steadicam.
I think that's a team.
Lordy,
the reason you have a Steadicam on those big productions is because you've got 5 people that can help you run that Steadicam dedicated to that one rig. We don't have that in independent film. We don't have the luxury of having 100 people that can be, have an A team, a B team, and a C team that can rotate out. And so a gimbal fits the need. It gets the job done.
Right. So what, Jobe, what is your goal as a filmmaker? Do you want to stay in the commercial space, forever, or do you want to be the next Chris Nolan, or do you want to be
somewhere in between?
Actually, you said camera. Do you want to be the next? His name was just in my head. Nolan's guy. His DP.
Oh, Dwight.
No.
That's.
I can't remember what it was. Do you want to be the next best DP? What's your goal?
I think my goal has changed a couple times since graduating. Just kind of being on so many different kinds of sets, having so many different kinds of experiences. Like at first I wanted to go to LA, everyone did. Like everyone does, in the filmmaking space. I want to go to LA. I want to be the next Christopher Nolan. I want to go be a good director, live in this space. But being here and seeing the LA lifestyle coming in with these people that productions fly in, seeing I've worked on TV shows where they've had whole crews come in from LA or New York. And just seeing that environment, it's just not for me. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and crap talk LA because that's not.
Yeah,
it's just not for me. But definitely a goal that I have now is to not only improve the quality of life of filmmaking in West Virginia, but also just shine a light on it. Yeah. Because the West Virginia Film Office, shout out Dave Lavender, has
he's gotten plenty of shout outs on this podcast.
He's done nothing but bend back over labor to try and not only improve the filmmaking space here, but bring more work, bring more productions, help the filmmaking program, help the Windows and Video production program, help bringing more of a light, because there are people here who want to work. It's not we're sitting here with the 3 of us and we're the light in the bastion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are so many different types
but,
of people.
I know of a nonprofit that can help, that is trying to also do those things.
I think that, that is one of the reasons why we're seeing less and less work in LA. And it's because more people are staying closer to home. I think that as each of the 48 the lower 48 develop these tax incentives and programs that bring stuff to their state, less people have to leave, less people have to uproot and start a whole new life. And I think there's a lot of value in working where you're from and helping to build a community. West Virginia is built on small towns. And you go to my small town, you go to Van, West Virginia, it's all coal mines. That's a lot of hardworking people, and they all come together to make sure that mine runs successfully. And I think you're seeing that more in, commercial video production, filmmaking, the community being such a big draw. And I think that is the community is what's drawing the optimism. As this community continues to grow, more people become optimistic. And as optimism grows, then so does that confidence. And so as your confidence grows, then you're able to, again, keep growing. So being in Appalachia has its challenges. Beyond a gear rental, what are some challenges that you faced early on in your career?
Just getting work.
Amen.
Yeah, a lot of there aren't a lot of films clamoring to film in West Virginia these days. Also, a lot of the work in this state is just commercial. If you do want to pursue this as a career, professionally and seriously, you have to go commercial work. There are ways to not, I guess. I mean, if you want to go for it, social media, or work towards that internet space, you can. I mean, that's a perfectly viable option.
It's still a commercial space, even if you are doing social media.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, this is probably the first time I've announced this on this podcast, but I just shut down my client side of stuff. I'm now going to be very selective, referrals, events only, but retainers probably going to start kicking them out the door and cycling them out. Because I want to do film. I want to do movies. That's what I want to do. So I got a day job. I was self-employed for 6 months and enjoyed it, but there was a lot that I couldn't control, and it drained me creatively. So there is very, very, if you want to do film, you got to get a day job, because you got to be able to pay the bills. And on the independent space, there's not a great way to make money doing films in West Virginia.
As much as I would love to live off of Crafty every day, I'd like to keep my lights on.
Yeah, right.
Well, and
you need to grip an electric guy at your house.
Yeah, AEP. That's my grip and electric guy.
I think that brings up an important thing, because West Virginia, in my opinion, has some great storytellers. Mm-hmm. I think they need to be inspired to write that down and get involved, and to reach out to community and say, hey, I've got this story. Is it possible? Is it a thing? Because, again, it helps inspire confidence and get that snowball building. Storytelling is difficult.
It's a talent.
It is
100%.
Any stories that you'd like to tell from set?
Ooh, there's a couple. There was this one time that I was on set, and Jerry can attest to this. I was working up in the Snowshoe Mountains, and I was working with the director, and I was PAing. That was right out of college, I think, maybe the beginning of 20.
It was 12 inches of snow on the ground.
Yeah, no, it was. Here we all are, bundled up around these ATVs. We're trying to get B-roll of the area, and one of the ATVs was dirty because it was driving in mud, and ATVs drive in mud. But we were all standing around getting ready for the shot. They harnessed Jerry in, and they were. The director was like, "Hey, fly me in some paper towels." And I go to look in the kind of the PPE kit where everything was, and it just wasn't any paper towels. I had previously gone to the store the day before, buy everything, and they were not on the list. I checked it twice. Don't worry, I Santa Claused it. And I was like, oh, they'll mess up paper towels in the grip truck, or maybe someone on set does, and they're on the list, so I'm not going to, beat a dead horse with it. So, flashback, or I guess flash forward to the day, the next day, the director started like, hey, where's my paper towels? I need paper towels. And I'm just kind of standing there what well,
get him his paper towels.
yeah, someone gets paper towels. I don't know what we're talking about. And then like he just keeps getting progressively louder and louder about it, and everyone's just kind of staring at him, and then staring at me because I'm the PA. Like I have to go get him.
You're the guy.
And
you're the paper towel guy.
I look at the PPE kit and I found a little pack of Kleenex, and I was like, he is gonna get so mad about this, but you know what? He asked for paper towels, so I walk up to him and I hand him the Kleenex, and he's like, "What is this?" And I was like, "It's paper towels. We don't have paper towels.
This is paper towels.
We ain't got paper towels, so this is the best thing we got."
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Forget it. We're just gonna get the shot."
Pro tip. Sam's Club sells 34 microfiber yellow towels that I take with me to set because it's crazy how many times you need a paper towel on set,
But also, I think that speaks to the importance of the PA, on set.
100%, yes. Having great communication, not only having the production team work with their PA, but just kind of teaching them like what to do, what not to do. And that's kind of like what I've learned coming out of Marshall and being a PA, like being a PA on so many different types of sets. You have a unique experience of just kind of like observing and learning. And some sets and some directors handle it better than others. Sometimes you're yelled at for not having paper towels, but sometimes you're given a unique opportunity where the director will be like, "Hey, can you go help lighting?" Or, "Hey, can you go help camera?" Or, "Can you go help sound?" And I think it's a great way to learn. And like, especially if you're even still in Marshall or still in like the video production program or filmmaking program now, like it sucks. I know being a PA is terrible. Higher the budget, the harder the job. I mean, that's just how it goes. Being a PA, you're just kind of like the grunt, and that's just how it is. I mean, there's no way to change that.
Yeah.
But it still gives you an opportunity to learn, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of just observe how a set operates. Because coming out of college, I really did not know how a set operated.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I went to school during COVID. We didn't really have a lot of opportunity to go on set because there just wasn't any.
Right.
And I came out of school and I went to my first job not knowing what really the etiquette of what to do, but being a PA and coming out of school as with that degree, people were like, okay, he has a semblance of what to do.
Yeah.
So we'll hire him, then he'll just learn on location.
Yeah.
And that I think helped me a lot, being able to go as a PA and be like, okay, I'm going to stand by that guy and then ask if he needs help and then just watch what he does.
Yeah.
Because something that going kind of circling back to that short film I was talking about that I did in 23, it was the camera department and they were just breaking down an RE cam and like building it back up and getting the rig ready for the next day. And I was PAing from that set and I was like, hey, you guys need help? And they're like, not really, but you can watch if you want.
Right.
And I learned like how to like break down an RE cam setup. Like I learned like what it was, like what the different components of this rig was. And
Yeah. And that's something, again, you're not just going to happen upon somebody breaking down an RE.
Yeah, it's not exactly something wild and wonderful West Virginia.
This isn't where I parked my car.
I was able to work on a set as a grip / he rented some stuff from Eagle Eye as well, but I worked on the set as a grip, and he had a red Komodo, and I had never used a red camera before, so I was able to watch him build it out. He flew in from Arizona, and he actually landed and then came to here and got the gear, and then we went to set together, and I was able to watch him build it out from bare bones in his Pelican case to like a functioning thing, and I was like, man, that's cool. And I have a pretty complex rig myself, but the red stuff where they have all that proprietary equipment, the red monitor, the red cables, the red SSD, all that stuff kind of goes into its own place, and it's a really not compact, but tightly fitting rig, and it was cool to see that. And I don't want a red, but it's good to know that I was able to see how they strip down and get put back together. So
well, and you never know the next production that you're going to be on when you might need to know that, or you might save the day by just, hey, actually you're doing that. Just just being able to offer that little bit of advice and that knowledge. It's whenever you get on set, what is the first thing that you try to do? What is as a cam operator in a commercial, what is the first thing that you kind of are delegated with?
The first thing that I do is I talk to the director. I talk with him at 291 specifically. His name is Taylor Reynolds, and I talk with him a lot on like how shot composition is, what are we doing, how do we want it to look, and how does he want to achieve it. And being such a smaller production, we do wear a lot of the hats. Like not only do I do camera op, I also grip and sound and kind of a little bit of everything. So the first thing that I do, at least, I talk to the director, and then we kind of formulate a plan from there and set up lights, set up camera. I immediately go to my Pelican cases and I bust out my Sony, and then I build the gimbal out, and just kind of never a dull moment. I think like I'm always moving, like I'm always trying to like talk with the director, trying to figure out what he wants, how he wants to look. I'm always walking around talking to like actors, trying to like help them with blocking, and then I'm always like figuring out how camera's going to move with them, and kind of just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Just kind of like walking around and maintaining the director's vision.
Well, in filmmaking, like anything else, proper planning prevents
Pathetic
poor
pathetic performance is what I was always told. I know what you were gonna say.
There's some kids listening, so
Gotta keep it PG, y'all.
What, Joby, what would you say is your favorite movie that's been either set in or made in West Virginia?
Oh, that's a hard one. I loved Matawan, the coal mining story.
You know, I brought this up earlier. He had not even heard of it.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't even know about it.
Oh,
I'm
it's such a good one.
I have to watch it.
Yep. So it's about the town Matewan, yeah, and it's about scabs in the coal mine, and that's a really, really good one.
Two stories of life, love, and infertility.
Yeah. You know, I gotta say my favorite, because it was filmed in my hometown, The Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia.
Really?
Yeah.
That's from your hometown. That's awesome.
I mean, I guess.
I'll say I'm not going to say my favorite movie made here is my movie. I'm not going to say I'm not that conceited. Probably when I think of a film made in West Virginia, I brought this up earlier. It wasn't entirely made here, but Silence of the Lambs, Langley's training ground, was actually filmed in, I think, Elkins, out in the woods out there. So, like, I guess that's it. Then you got stuff like Beat Down. That was great.
That was really good.
You know, Citizen Sleuth. Those
Ambrosia was really good.
Ambrosia was good.
True,
I'm going to see
yeah.
Citizen Sleuth again on Wednesday. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of good independent films, but on the larger scale, I'd say if Silence of the Lamb qualifies, that would be my pick.
Yeah, well, Sounds of the Lamb qualifies, and I'm going to steal Jacob's answer. But, I'm going to go with Matawan for, like, a film solely, like, born
A story based
here.
in
Yeah.
and built around. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I like The Wild and Wonderful Whites because it's a documentary, but it is just so engaging and it tells a really fun story. And I would like to see them do the sequel to that, just because that area has changed a lot while also having stayed the same.
And hey, this is the third episode now. Documentaries are movies. And if you say they're not, then you're wrong. It's the third episode we've been able to say that. I had someone tell me award-winning, documentaries made, discussions with huge distributors.
Yeah.
They're not real movies. You didn't actually create anything.
See, and I think...
Oh, my goodness gracious.
So every time I have the chance, I doubt he even watches the podcast. But if he does,
You guys send a message.
he gets a shout-out without naming his name every single time.
So documentaries are movies.
I think it comes down to the story.
Go again, Joby, right here.
All right, right here. Documentaries are movies.
That's right.
I think it comes down to execution, because documentaries can just be testimonials. They can be simple. They can not be a full movie, but or they might play better as a limited series or this or that or the other. But it comes down to the story and format.
During the actually about halfway through the production when, and I'll be quick because that's not what this podcast is about, but when I started really seeing the potential for the movie, me and my DP got together. She was also a producer. She and I got together at her house one morning. It's like 8 a.m. And we brought actually the whiteboard that is in there, and we wrote down how the story was going to flow.
Yeah.
That's where the documentary is made, is the story.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how it's going to tell a story as opposed to just being some shots of B-roll and some interviews. You know?
You get 8 interviews. It's not a movie.
Right. And we had probably 5 hours of shooting in this chart. You know, here's where we're going to stop, and then here's a great place to add this. And so, I mean, that's when a, you know, testimonial becomes a doc.
And then a doc becomes a feature.
Yeah. And then a feature becomes something that I just want to sell and get rid of.
Becomes the to the anime.
That's the joke, Jobe, is I had my publicist was like, hey, they are talking about a straight split, a minimum guarantee, or an IP. And he said, I told him no to the IP. And I was like, why? It's like, if they're willing to buy it, I'm not doing anything else with this. I'm done. I'm not making a sequel. I'm good. I'm so burnt out on this movie. If they're willing to pay for it, then I'm willing to. You can have it. And then Jerry said that's when you're going to see them come out with, you know, the anime feature or the anime cartoon, because they have the IP and can do what they want with it. I said, as long as my name is on it and as long as Eagle Eye is on it, you can sell it all they want. I'm not going to sell it for cheap, but I'll sell it.
Yeah, I'll sell it. Hey, to the anime wants a repost, so you know where to call.
Well, and IPs are an interesting thing because it does seem like they are dominating Hollywood right now. If you've got a solid IP, then it's getting made.
And for those, IP is intellectual property.
Correct.
So if it doesn't actually have to even be a movie like mine, it can be the idea of a movie. If you go copyright it, it's your IP, and then you can sell that.
Well, it's like I just found out that Barbie, you know, the IP Barbie
bounced around.
It bounced around. It was purchased and sold, you know, a dozen times before they were able to. A studio was able to put a story behind it and then greenlight that story and be able to push it through. And I'm sure if you're Mattel, you're loving that.
Yeah.
The royalties must be insane.
They just keep passing that around. But I think that's also another important reason why developing characters is so big, because we're seeing it. What was Yellowstone? It just spun off into the 4 6s, and that all started with building out a character that one resonated with audiences and gained their attention.
And not even, you know, for spin-off's sake, but the ability to have a character that's so when I think of a character that like sells the show, not necessarily a spinoff, I think of Jim Halpert and Dwight Schrute. The Office, if it weren't for those two, Pam, Michael
Scott is The Office.
Michael Scott is The Office, but it's those characters that sell it.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
Well, because Michael Scott is just an annoying boss without, you know, the other antics in The Office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the importance of your characters is, you know, it can be a spinoff. It could just be the fact that this is why people love this movie or this show, is because Jim Halpert's like every other guy with big dreams and a small crap paying job, you know?
Yeah.
In Scranton, PA.
So, Jobe, before we wrap it up, where can people find you? Where can people see your work? That kind of thing.
Yeah. A lot of my work is with Studio 291. We repost a lot of our stuff on social media. Just follow Studio 291 on Facebook, Instagram. I recently just co-directed a award-winning short film called Munch. The Appalachian Huntington Music Art Festival, same to our film festival, and that's on YouTube. But just look up.
You won that contest, didn't you, Jobe? Yeah.
I did. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
It completely slipped my mind, but I co-directed that. I had so many thoughts buzzing in my head. I've never had to like think about it all before. But not to, you know, cut your like outro out short, but I did co-direct that with Issa McMullen. They co-directed it with me, and it was all of our friends actually that got together for the short film and got together and put out a win.
That's awesome.
And, you know, you came in today and stumbled upon a script that you and myself and another one of our friends helped write a couple of years ago. So, you know, be on the lookout for that as well. The Night Out
For sure. We'll love to see it on the screen.
Awesome, Jobe. Well, we appreciate you coming in today, braving the elements. Jacob?
From all of us at the Appalachian Creative Podcast, this is Jobe, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.